The Stoics believed that our peace is too precious to be handed over to just anyone, especially to those who poison it quietly. While they taught compassion, patience, and understanding, they also warned us not to become passive in the face of harmful behavior. Stoicism isn't about tolerating everything. It's about setting boundaries that protect your inner fortress. And one of the most powerful ways to stay grounded is by knowing what you must never accept, no matter how calm or kind you are. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, only what you do. This means we must stay focused on our own conduct, yes, but not at the cost of allowing others to disrespect our space, values, or peace. Tolerating toxic behavior isn't strength, it's self-abandonment. And the Stoic path is not about sacrificing your dignity in the name of peace, but about choosing peace that includes self-respect. 1. Demeaning others, the hidden reflection of our own insecurities. There's a certain illusion of power that comes with belittling others. It can feel like dominance, control, or superiority. But beneath that illusion lies something far more fragile: insecurity. When a person chooses to demean someone else, especially in public or behind their back, it's rarely about the target. More often, it's a desperate attempt to mask their own feelings of inadequacy or fear. Stoic philosophy teaches us that the only person we can truly control is ourselves, and yet we often misuse our energy by trying to control how others are seen rather than refining our own inner character. Demeaning others often begins subtly. A sarcastic comment here, a condescending tone there. Perhaps it's wrapped in humor or disguised as just being honest. But the effect is always the same. It diminishes the dignity of another human being. And the moment we start to strip someone else of their worth, we also chip away at our own humanity. Stoic thinkers like Marcus Aurelius emphasized compassion and justice as key virtues of the wise person. What does it say about our soul when we seek to rise by pushing someone else down? In many social environments, workplaces, online platforms, or even family settings, putting others down can become a habit, almost a social currency. People gather in corners to gossip, mock, and criticize those who are absent. It's an easy way to bond, to feel in, to affirm our place in a group. But according to Stoicism, the wise person does not seek acceptance through cruelty. True strength is shown not in how harshly we speak of others, but in how gently we treat those who can offer us nothing. Moreover, there's a deep cost to constantly criticizing or mocking others. It poisons our own mind. The Stoics believe that what we allow into our thoughts shapes the quality of our lives. If we fill our days with judgments and harsh opinions, our hearts become harder, and we lose the softness that allows us to grow. Instead of seeing others as fellow travelers on the same path of life, we start to view them as threats, enemies, or competition. And in doing so, we isolate ourselves from the very connection and understanding that make life meaningful. Demeaning others is also a form of emotional laziness. It's far easier to criticize than to understand. It takes effort to look at someone's story, to imagine their struggles, or to see the pain behind their behavior. But the Stoics remind us, every human soul is worth the effort. Epictetus once said, "When you see someone weeping in sorrow, do not mock them, but rather imagine how fragile we all are." When we choose empathy over insult, we're not just being kind, we're being wise. Reflection. Ask yourself honestly, have you ever felt superior by making someone else look small? What did you really gain in that moment? Was it peace? Was it confidence? Or was it a fleeting satisfaction that left you emptier afterward? The next time you feel the urge to criticize or mock someone, pause. Look within. Often, what we attack in others reflects what we fear in ourselves. The Stoic path is not about pretending to be emotionless or perfect. It's about training ourselves to respond with wisdom instead of impulse. Choose compassion. Choose silence over mockery. Choose to elevate rather than diminish. Because in the end, how we treat others is a mirror of our true character. And the world is always watching, even when we think no one is. 2. Manipulating for personal gain. The silent erosion of character. Manipulation is often subtle. It wears many faces: charm, persuasion, emotional appeal, or strategic silence. But no matter how polished the presentation, at its core, manipulation for personal gain is a betrayal, not just of others, but of our own integrity. When someone uses others as tools or pawns to fulfill their desires, they are not just crossing ethical lines. They are distancing themselves from the very virtues that build a stable and meaningful life. Stoic philosophy warns us against such distortions of power, reminding us that true strength lies in virtue, not in cunning. In our modern world, manipulation is often rewarded. The workplace applauds those who know how to play the game. Society admires those who can get ahead, no matter the cost. But the Stoics ask us to step back and look deeper. What do we really win if our success is built on half-truths, false impressions, or twisted words? According to Marcus Aurelius, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When we manipulate, we stain our own soul, darkening it with deceit, fear, and control. People who manipulate often justify their actions. It's just strategy. I'm doing what I have to do. They would have done the same to me. But this kind of reasoning erodes self-awareness. The danger is not just in harming others. It's in becoming someone who no longer recognizes what is right. In the moment, manipulation might bring results: a promotion, attention, admiration, or advantage. But over time, it drains us from within. It creates relationships based on fear or utility instead of trust and respect. Manipulation also breeds isolation. Those who manipulate constantly calculate and perform, fearing that others might see through their facade. They are rarely at peace, always managing narratives and guarding secrets. This mental load is heavy, and it eventually leads to inner emptiness. Stoicism teaches us that peace comes from aligning our actions with virtue, not from controlling outcomes or perceptions. When you operate from sincerity, you are free. But when you manipulate, you are trapped. First by your own lies, and eventually by the consequences they bring. There's also a greater social impact to consider. Manipulative behavior, especially when repeated or normalized, weakens the trust that binds communities. Whether it's a leader exploiting their team, a friend playing emotional games, or a partner using guilt as a weapon, each act of manipulation chips away at the possibility of genuine connection. And once trust is broken, it is difficult to restore. The Stoics believed in building a life of eunoia, goodwill toward others. Manipulation is its opposite. It seeks not to uplift, but to extract, not to build, but to bend. Ultimately, manipulation is a short-term tactic with long-term damage. The Stoic path urges us to seek influence through integrity, not control. It is far more powerful to live in a way that others naturally respect and trust than to constantly engineer outcomes through dishonesty. A person who is grounded in virtue will always have more lasting power than one who climbs through deception. Reflection. Have you ever shaped your words or actions not out of honesty, but to get something from someone? What did it cost you internally? Did you feel more connected, more secure, or more alone? Take time to examine the intent behind your interactions. Are you guiding or deceiving? Are you leading with truth or tactics? The Stoic ideal is not about being passive or naive. It's about being deliberate and honorable. You can be strategic without being manipulative. You can seek goals without using people. In a world that often rewards cleverness over character, choose to be the exception. Choose to be someone who rises through authenticity, not schemes. Because at the end of the day, the respect that matters most is not from others, but from the part of you that sleeps at night with peace, knowing you didn't have to lie, twist, or play games to win. 3. Disrespecting personal boundaries, a silent violation of human dignity. Personal boundaries are invisible lines that define where one person ends and another begins. They represent our values, limits, emotional needs, and space. When someone chooses to cross these lines, whether through words, actions, or expectations, they do more than just invade someone's comfort zone. They disrespect autonomy, erode trust, and weaken the foundation of healthy relationships. In Stoic philosophy, one of the highest principles is respect for others' reason and will, recognizing that every human being is an independent agent deserving of dignity and freedom. Disrespecting boundaries often doesn't come with loud warning signs. It can appear in the form of persistent questioning after someone says, "I don't want to talk about it." It can be a friend who pressures you to go out even when you've said no. It can even happen in families, where personal choices are criticized, dismissed, or controlled. These actions may seem small, but over time, they can have a deep emotional impact. When people feel like they are not allowed to say no, or that their no is meaningless, they lose their sense of agency. They become less of themselves. In today's interconnected world, the challenge of respecting boundaries has become even more complex. With digital communication, people expect instant replies. With social media, people assume access to others' lives is always permitted. But just because someone is reachable doesn't mean they owe us their time. Just because someone shares one part of themselves online doesn't mean they've consented to scrutiny or judgment. Respecting boundaries means understanding not just what we can do, but what we shouldn't do, out of courtesy, empathy, and emotional intelligence. Stoicism teaches us to master ourselves, not others. When we disrespect personal boundaries, we engage in a subtle form of control. We impose our preferences, needs, or curiosity onto someone else, often under the assumption that we know better or that we are entitled. But the wise Stoic does not seek to overpower the will of others. Instead, they exercise discipline over their own impulses, especially the impulse to push where one is not invited. Furthermore, boundaries exist for a reason. People set them to protect their mental health, their peace, or their energy. Just because a boundary doesn't make sense to us doesn't mean it's invalid. It is not our role to determine the worth of someone else's limits. Our role is to listen, to respect, and to adapt. The Stoic way is not about stubbornness. It's about harmony. And harmony cannot exist where one person constantly oversteps another. Disrespecting boundaries also undermines mutual trust. Once a person feels unsafe around you, emotionally or physically, they begin to withhold. They become guarded, anxious, or resentful. The relationship suffers, not because of a dramatic betrayal, but because of a consistent failure to honor the space between self and other. That space must be preserved with care. Seneca once wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and part of that suffering often comes from relationships where our inner boundaries are not respected, where we feel emotionally crowded, judged, or pushed. Reflection. Ask yourself, have you ever dismissed someone's discomfort as overreacting? Have you ever pressured someone into explaining something they clearly didn't want to share? These moments, though unintentional, can leave lasting marks. It takes humility and maturity to step back when someone draws a line. It takes strength to hear no and not push further. The Stoic doesn't take boundaries personally, they take them seriously. They understand that love, respect, and friendship are not measured by access or control, but by how well we protect one another's space. In the end, respecting boundaries is a quiet but powerful form of compassion. It says, I see you, I hear you, and I will not try to shape you into who I want you to be. It's one of the highest forms of human respect, and one of the most important habits of a person who walks the Stoic path with integrity. 4. Blaming others for your own mistakes. Escaping responsibility, abandoning growth. One of the most deeply rooted habits in human behavior is the tendency to shift blame when something goes wrong. Whether in relationships, work, or personal goals, our instinct often leads us to look outward instead of inward. It's easier to say, it's their fault, than to admit, I failed. Yet from a Stoic perspective, blaming others for our own mistakes is not only a sign of weakness, it is a direct obstacle to wisdom, maturity, and personal freedom. Blame is a psychological shield we use to protect our ego. It allows us to avoid the discomfort of guilt and the sting of self-reflection. But while blame may protect us in the short term, it ultimately costs us the one thing that truly matters: growth. As long as we deny responsibility, we deny ourselves the opportunity to change. And as long as we hold others accountable for our choices, we surrender control over our own destiny. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, said it best. It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. When we blame others, we react passively. We give away our power and become victims of circumstance. Stoicism calls us to be active participants in our own lives, to own our actions, our failures, and our consequences. Mistakes are not something to run from. They are teachers, pointing us toward better ways of living. Blaming others often becomes a pattern. In a professional setting, it's the employee who never takes ownership of a missed deadline. In relationships, it's the partner who always finds fault in the other's behavior but never examines their own. Over time, this behavior erodes trust and credibility. People begin to notice. And while they may not always confront the blamer directly, respect and confidence quietly slip away. No one admires the person who points fingers. We admire those who say, yes, I made a mistake, and here's what I'm doing to fix it. There's also an emotional toll. Blaming others leads to bitterness, resentment, and frustration. We start to see the world as unfair and everyone else as incompetent. This mindset poisons our inner peace. According to the Stoics, peace comes not from external order, but from internal clarity. Taking responsibility restores that clarity. It reminds us that while we cannot control everything that happens, we can always control our response and our willingness to grow from it. Moreover, blaming others is often rooted in fear of judgment, failure, or losing status. But the Stoic path teaches us to face those fears with courage. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change." This is the voice of someone who does not fear being wrong, because being wrong is not the end. It is the beginning of something better. It takes humility to say, I was wrong. It takes even more strength to say, I will do better. But this is where true growth lives. This is where respect begins, both from others and within ourselves. Reflection. When was the last time you blamed someone else for something that, deep down, was partly or fully your responsibility? What did you avoid by doing that? And what did it cost you? Look at your life through the lens of ownership. What habits or patterns have you justified by blaming others? Could those be the very things holding you back from progress? The Stoics remind us, your life is your responsibility. You may not control what others do, but you always control how you respond, how you learn, and how you move forward. Let go of the impulse to blame. Replace it with the discipline to reflect. Not because blame is always false, but because growth is always possible. And it begins the moment you stop pointing fingers and start looking in the mirror. 5. Using anger to control others. The illusion of power and the cost of influence. Anger is a natural emotion. It rises quickly, often without invitation, in response to pain, injustice, or frustration. But while it may be natural, it becomes dangerous when used as a tool, especially a tool to control others. Some people weaponize their anger, not as a reaction, but as a strategy. They raise their voice, slam a door, glare with silence, or lash out emotionally to intimidate, manipulate, or dominate those around them. This isn't just unhealthy, it's a subtle form of tyranny. The Stoic philosophers were particularly cautious about anger. Seneca, in his essay on anger, described it as a temporary madness. And what do we do when we're mad? We push people to obey, not because they believe we are right, but because they are afraid. Using anger to control others may give the illusion of power, but it's a hollow authority built on fear, not respect. True influence does not require rage. It demands reason. When anger becomes a pattern of control, it erodes relationships at their core. People stop being open. They start walking on eggshells. Children raised under this kind of emotional pressure often grow up confused about boundaries. Employees managed with anger learn to survive, not to thrive. Spouses in such environments begin to withdraw emotionally or retaliate with passive resistance. Fear might lead to temporary obedience, but it will never produce lasting loyalty or love. Anger-based control also damages the person who uses it. Over time, they become dependent on emotional outbursts to feel in charge. They lose the ability to influence through calm authority or rational dialogue. Their self-control weakens, and their inner peace fades. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it. When anger rules, it poisons the person who carries it long before it hurts those it's directed toward." And let's be honest, many who use anger as a control tactic are not truly angry. They are afraid. Afraid of losing power. Afraid of being disrespected, afraid of not being heard. Anger becomes their armor, a loud and aggressive mask to hide deeper insecurities. But Stoicism calls us to rise above fear and ego. It teaches that real strength lies in mastery of the self, not domination of others. Consider this. If someone only listens to you because they fear your temper, have you truly earned their respect? If you have to shout to be heard, are you being persuasive or just loud? Influence built on calm wisdom lasts. Control built on anger collapses the moment fear fades. Moreover, using anger as a weapon often leads to regret. Words spoken in fury are rarely forgotten. Actions driven by rage often go too far. And apologies, though necessary, cannot always repair the damage. One of the key Stoic principles is prohairesis, the idea that our true freedom lies in our ability to choose our inner response. You cannot control what others do, but you can control whether or not you turn your anger into a weapon. Reflection. Have you ever used your anger to get your way? Did it feel like power in the moment, but leave you feeling empty later? How often have you mistaken fear-driven compliance for genuine connection? Take time to observe your reactions. The next time anger rises, ask yourself, am I trying to solve a problem, or am I trying to force control? Choose the path of discipline over domination. Choose calm over cows. In the end, the strongest person in any room is not the one who shouts the loudest, but the one who remains anchored in self-control when the storm comes. You don't need rage to lead. You don't need fear to be heard. Let your influence come from clarity, patience, and conviction, not from the illusion of control that anger offers. That is the way of wisdom. That is the way of the Stoic. 6. Belittling the feelings and perspectives of others, a quiet form of arrogance that destroys connection. In our fast-paced, opinion-driven world, it has become all too easy to dismiss what others feel or think, especially when their emotions or views differ from ours. We shrug off someone's anxiety as drama. We call their experiences exaggeration, or we quickly label their views as irrational. What seems like harmless disagreement or indifference is, in reality, a form of disrespect. When we belittle someone's emotions or perspectives, we don't just disagree, we diminish their humanity. From a Stoic standpoint, this kind of behavior reflects arrogance and lack of wisdom. Stoicism teaches us to strive for understanding, patience, and compassion. To belittle is to assume superiority, that our thoughts are clearer, our feelings more valid, and our worldview more accurate than someone else's. But such superiority is often rooted not in strength, but in insecurity and ego. People express themselves differently. Some are emotionally sensitive, others are more analytical. Some have lived through pain that we cannot see. Just because we don't understand or relate to someone's emotions doesn't mean they are wrong. Their truth may not be our truth, but it is still truth to them. When we deny their emotional experience, we send the message, "You don't matter." And that is one of the most destructive things we can communicate to another human being. Belittling others can take many forms. It can be overt, like mocking someone's feelings, interrupting their thoughts, or using sarcasm to dismiss their concerns. But it can also be subtle, like eye-rolling, changing the subject, or listening only to reply, not to understand. These behaviors slowly destroy trust and safety in relationships. Over time, people begin to shut down. They stop sharing. They stop reaching out. And what remains is a connection in appearance only, hollowed out from the inside. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Whenever you are about to find fault with someone, ask yourself the following question. What fault of mine most nearly resembles the one I am about to criticize?" This Stoic insight reminds us to turn the lens inward. Often, when we belittle others, it's because we are uncomfortable with our own vulnerability. We don't want to deal with emotions, so we dismiss them in others. But that is not strength. That is avoidance. True wisdom is marked by emotional humility. It means recognizing that we don't always have the full picture, that behind someone's fear or frustration might be a story we don't know, that what seems like a small issue to us might feel overwhelming to someone else. The Stoic path is not cold detachment. It is rational empathy. It is the ability to hear without judging, to disagree without demeaning, and to be firm without being cruel. Dismissing others doesn't make us strong. It makes us blind. We begin to live in a world of one, where only our thoughts and feelings count. But such isolation, though self-imposed, eventually leads to loneliness and emptiness. Connection requires respect. And respect begins with the simple willingness to say, "I may not understand exactly what you're feeling, but I recognize that you feel it, and that matters." Reflection. Think back. Have there been moments where you invalidated someone else's experience? Perhaps not out of malice, but out of impatience, discomfort, or the belief that they were overreacting? What would have changed if, in that moment, you had chosen to listen deeply instead? We all want to be heard. We all want our pain and perspective to be seen. even if not agreed with. So let us offer to others the respect we crave ourselves. The Stoic life is not about shutting out emotion. It is about cultivating clarity and character. And part of that character is knowing when to speak and when to simply listen, truly listen. You may not change their mind or solve their problem, but your presence, free of judgment and full of compassion, may be the thing they remember most. 7. The habit of speaking ill behind someone's back, a subtle poison to character and connection. Gossip, backbiting, slander. These words may sound old-fashioned, but the behavior they describe is as common as ever. Whether it happens in whispered conversations, chat groups, or casual lunch talks, speaking ill of others behind their backs has become a cultural norm in many circles. And yet, behind its casual mask lies something profoundly destructive, not just to the person being talked about, but to the speaker's own character. Why do people speak negatively about others in their absence? Often, it's not about truth, but about ego. Some gossip to feel superior, using someone else's flaws or failures as a way to lift themselves up. Others do it to fit in with a group, to bond over shared mockery or criticism. And some speak poorly of others simply out of envy, resentful of someone's success, confidence, or happiness. But no matter the reason, Stoic wisdom sees this habit as a sign of weakness, not strength. Epictetus said, "If evil be spoken of you and it be true, correct yourself. If it be a lie, laugh at it." The Stoic is not concerned with what others say in secret, but is deeply concerned with what they themselves say in public and private. Why? Because words reflect inner life. When we speak with cruelty or malice about someone who isn't there to defend themselves, we reveal more about our own integrity than about the person we're targeting. Backbiting is a quiet form of betrayal. It creates an illusion of connection. People laughing together, nodding in agreement, but that connection is built on sand. If someone gossips with you, they will likely gossip about you. Trust erodes, respect dissolves. Even among those who appear close, suspicion grows. In the end, gossip doesn't build community. It destroys it from within. There's also a deeper harm. It distorts how we see the world. When we habitually speak poorly of others, we train our minds to see people in the worst light. We become cynical, judgmental, and overly focused on flaws. Instead of seeking understanding, we seek superiority. Instead of building bridges, we build walls. Over time, this robs us of peace. As Marcus Aurelius warned, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Think also of the emotional weight gossip places on our conscience. Many people who speak ill of others later feel guilt or anxiety. They worry about being discovered. They sense that they've betrayed their values. And when they face the person they spoke about, there's often shame or discomfort, because deep down, they know the truth. So, what does Stoicism ask of us? Radical responsibility. Instead of talking about people, we should talk to them. If someone has made a mistake, confront them with kindness and clarity. If we admire someone, praise them publicly and sincerely. And if we hear others speaking with cruelty, we can choose silence, or even gently change the subject. Virtue is not just about avoiding harm. It's about promoting goodness, even in small moments. Reflection. Have you ever felt the temporary satisfaction of gossip, only to feel a quiet guilt afterward? Have you ever found out that someone was speaking behind your back and felt that sting of betrayal? Now reverse the question. Have your words ever caused that pain in someone else? The next time you're tempted to speak poorly of someone who's not present, pause and ask yourself, would I say this if they were in the room? If not, it may be better left unsaid. Speak with integrity, or remain silent with dignity. In a world loud with rumors, opinions, and mockery, be someone who speaks truth gently, stands for others respectfully, and protects the unseen with honor. That is the path of the wise. That is the discipline of the Stoic. 8. Demanding perfection from others, but not from yourself. The quiet hypocrisy that destroys integrity. It's one of the most common traps we fall into as human beings, holding others to impossible standards while quietly excusing ourselves from the same expectations. We criticize others for being late, yet justify our own delays. We expect constant kindness and professionalism from friends, family, or coworkers, while allowing ourselves the occasional emotional outburst or thoughtless word. We scrutinize others' flaws under a microscope, yet guard our own with layers of rationalization. This double standard is not only unfair, it is corrosive to our relationships, our credibility, and ultimately, our character. From the Stoic point of view, this is a form of moral laziness. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." But what many people practice is the opposite, being harsh with others and lenient with themselves. Instead of using our insight to grow, we use it to judge. Instead of seeking self-mastery, we seek control over others. And in doing so, we become blind to our own contradictions. Why do we fall into this pattern? Partly, it's a defense mechanism. When we focus on others' shortcomings, it distracts us from our own. It's easier to complain about a coworker's lack of discipline than to confront our own procrastination. It's more comfortable to highlight someone else's emotional instability than to face our own unresolved anger. Pointing the finger outward feels safer than turning the mirror inward. But make no mistake, this hypocrisy eats away at integrity. Over time, people notice. They sense the unfairness, the imbalance. Relationships become strained, trust fades, and respect diminishes. Nobody wants to be held to a standard they see the other person regularly violate. Eventually, your words lose weight because your actions don't align. And this isn't just about public perception. Internally, there is a cost as well. When we demand perfection from others while excusing ourselves, we fracture our own sense of honesty. The mind may justify it, but the conscience doesn't rest. Deep down, we know. And that knowledge leads to quiet shame, defensiveness, and a fragile ego that's always on guard. The Stoics remind us that the only person we truly control is ourselves. Epictetus taught that external events and the actions of others are not within our power, but our thoughts, intentions, and conduct are. So why spend so much energy on micromanaging the behavior of others when our own house is not yet in order? This doesn't mean we shouldn't have standards, but those standards should start with us. We lead by example, not by criticism. If we value honesty, we must be honest ourselves. If we value kindness, we must show it, even when it's inconvenient. If we expect discipline, we must cultivate it first within. When we do this, something powerful happens. People listen more. They trust more. They feel safer around us. Not because we are perfect, but because we are authentic. We aren't demanding flawless behavior. We're demonstrating sincere effort. And that effort is contagious. Reflection. Take a moment to reflect. Have you ever expected someone to meet a standard that you yourself were not living up to? Did you feel justified at the time? And if you reverse the roles, if someone expected that of you, how would you feel? The truth is, no one is perfect. Not you, not those around you. But the Stoic path is not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about being humble enough to recognize our own flaws and compassionate enough to support others through theirs. Next time you're tempted to judge or demand, pause. Ask yourself, Have I mastered this in myself? If not, then perhaps your time is better spent on self-improvement than on critique. Lead with integrity. Let your life be the proof of your values. Because when your standards begin with you, others will rise to meet them, not out of fear, but out of respect. 9. Never apologizing or admitting fault. A silent killer of relationships and character. There is a certain kind of person who never says, "I'm sorry." They shift blame, offer vague justifications, or pretend nothing happened. When they hurt someone, intentionally or not, they deflect. When confronted, they become defensive or dismissive. And over time, their refusal to apologize or admit fault becomes a defining trait, one that slowly pushes others away, erodes trust, and destroys their own moral clarity. In Stoic philosophy, this behavior reflects not strength, but inner weakness. It's the inability to look oneself in the mirror with honesty. Marcus Aurelius, in his meditations, often reminded himself to be humble enough to learn from every mistake, and brave enough to face every truth, even the ones that hurt. For the Stoic, admitting fault is not a sign of defeat. It is the beginning of wisdom. Why do some people find it so hard to apologize? Often, it's rooted in fear. Fear of appearing weak, fear of losing control, fear of being judged. For some, pride becomes a kind of armor, shielding them from the discomfort of vulnerability. But that armor becomes a prison. When you can't say "I was wrong," you trap yourself in a world where you must always be right, even when you're not. This pattern creates tension in every relationship, personal, professional, or social. People may tolerate it for a while, but eventually they grow tired of dealing with someone who refuses accountability. They may stop confronting you, but not because they've forgiven you. They simply stop trusting you. They stop expecting growth from you. And that silent disappointment can be far more damaging than open conflict. There's also a deeper personal cost. Refusing to admit when you're wrong leads to a distorted self-image. You start believing your own narratives. You justify your actions, even when they hurt others. Over time, your ability to self-reflect weakens. You begin to value image over integrity. But as Epictetus said, it is not the things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them. If our opinions are never challenged, even by ourselves, we become trapped in delusion. Apologizing, on the other hand, is not about humiliation. It's about responsibility. It says, "I respect our connection enough to acknowledge the harm I caused." It invites healing, both for the other person and for ourselves. It keeps the heart soft, the mind open, and the conscience clean. A sincere apology requires 3 things: honesty, humility, and change. It's not just about saying sorry. It's about understanding what went wrong, accepting the consequences, and doing the work to improve. This is the path of character development. It's not easy, but it is essential. Ironically, those who apologize regularly and sincerely are often seen as more trustworthy, not less. Their willingness to admit fault becomes a sign of strength, because it shows they are accountable, self-aware, and committed to growth. In a world full of defensiveness and denial, a genuine apology stands out as a mark of rare courage. Reflection. Think about a recent moment where you may have hurt someone, whether through words, actions, or neglect. Did you apologize? Did you acknowledge the pain you caused? Or did pride step in and keep your mouth shut? Now imagine if the roles were reversed. How would you feel if someone refused to admit they'd wronged you? The truth is, everyone makes mistakes, everyone stumbles. What defines us is not whether we fail, but whether we learn, whether we grow, and whether we care enough to repair the damage we've done. Start today. Apologize where it's due. Not for show, not out of guilt, but because you value truth, character, and connection. Let your humility be a mirror of your strength, not a denial of it. In doing so, you rise, not in the eyes of others first, but in the quiet approval of your own soul. 10. Ignoring your own values and principles. The fastest way to lose yourself. In a world filled with noise, pressure, and distractions, it's surprisingly easy to drift away from the very values and principles that once defined you. At first, it might seem harmless. Making small compromises here and there, bending the truth, staying silent when you should speak up, or chasing approval instead of doing what's right. But over time, each little step away from your core beliefs becomes a step away from your true self. This is one of the most subtle forms of self-betrayal, and the cost is enormous. Stoic philosophy teaches us that virtue, living in accordance with reason and our highest principles, is the only true good. Everything else is secondary. As Epictetus said, know first who you are and then adorn yourself accordingly. But how many people live the other way around? They adorn themselves first. Status, money, image, and forget to ask who they truly are. Ignoring your values for external gain might give you temporary success. You might win people's attention, climb a career ladder, or avoid conflict. But deep down, something begins to erode. A quiet discomfort sets in, a sense that you are living someone else's life, or wearing a mask that no longer fits. And no matter how polished your image becomes, you start to feel hollow inside. Why do people abandon their principles? Often, it's because the world rewards conformity and short-term results. It's easier to go along with what's popular than to stand firm in what's right. It's more convenient to compromise when everyone else seems to be doing it. There's also fear, the fear of rejection, failure, or discomfort. And so, many people silence their inner voice just to fit in. But the Stoics remind us that peace doesn't come from comfort. It comes from alignment. When your actions reflect your principles, even difficulty feels meaningful. When they don't, even success feels empty. Think of someone who once believed in kindness, but became bitter after betrayal. Or someone who valued honesty, but learned to lie to survive in a toxic workplace. Or someone who stood for justice, but stayed quiet when it mattered most. Each of these is a story of quiet resignation, a surrender not of power, but of the soul. What makes it worse is that this drift often happens slowly. You don't wake up one day and abandon your values. It's a gradual process, one small compromise at a time. And then, one day, you look in the mirror and don't recognize who you've become. But here's the good news. You can always return. Your values are not lost. They're waiting beneath the surface, like a compass buried under dust. It takes courage to dig them up again, to realign your life, to face the consequences of past compromises. But this is the path to integrity. This is how you regain your strength, not by pretending you've never strayed, but by choosing to return. Real strength is being able to say, "This isn't who I want to be. I will change." And then, step by step, you begin again. You set new boundaries. You say no where you once said yes. You speak the truth even when your voice shakes. And in doing so, you reconnect with your inner clarity, the quiet confidence that comes from living in truth. Reflection. Ask yourself, what do I truly stand for? Not what others expect of me, not what society rewards, but what I believe is right. And more importantly, am I living that way? Have I made compromises that haunt me? Have I silenced my conscience in the name of convenience or approval? The Stoics remind us that it's never too late to return to virtue. Your past doesn't define you. Your choices today do. And the first step is to stop running from the voice within and start listening to it. Your values are your anchor in the storm. Ignore them and you drift. Honor them and you rise. Not just in reputation, but in soul. Live your life in a way that, even in silence, your conscience nods in approval. That is the Stoic path. That is the path back to yourself. Rejecting toxic behavior doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. The Stoic doesn't seek conflict, but they also don't allow their soul to be corroded by what they can say no to. These 10 behaviors are not just annoying, they are violations of your inner order. And the more clearly you see them, the more calmly and firmly you can stand your ground. In the end, Stoicism isn't passive. It's powerful. It teaches you to remain calm, yes, but not at the cost of becoming blind. Know what erodes your peace. Know what dims your clarity. And above all, know that saying no to what is toxic is not rejection. It is protection, not punishment, but preservation of the life you're working hard to live with wisdom, strength, and unshakable grace.